So I am so pleased to introduce Sunny Jones Ford, my former colleague, who is a licensed therapist and certified yoga instructor, speaker, facilitator, and founder of Cozy Body Wellness, a virtual mental health and wellness private practice. She earned her master's of social work from New York University and is a licensed therapist in New York State. This workshop is on radical acceptance, and Sunny will be exploring the power of fully acknowledging reality without resistance, judgment, or avoidance. Participants will learn about the origins of radical acceptance and how it differs from toxic positivity and emotional suppression. Through guided exercises, reflection, and discussion, attendees will gain practical tools to integrate radical acceptance into their daily lives, helping them navigate difficult emotions and embrace life's uncertainties with greater resilience. I know this was a very wanted topic, so I am so glad Sunny is here to discuss it. So hand it over to you, Sunny.
Great. Thank you so much, Carly, and also Jillian. Thank you so much for creating this space and welcoming me into this space. And hello to everyone that's here. Good to see you, and thanks for welcoming me into your space as well too. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So I prepared a few slides that I felt that would be helpful in talking as well. And so I want to make sure that everyone can see them. If you can just give me a thumbs up, if you can see the slides. Looks like they're loading. Okay.
Yes.
All right. So it looks like everyone can see them. So that's great. And so as we know, we're here for the Radical Acceptance Workshop. So it's a workshop on meeting reality with compassion and clarity. Okay, and so we're going to move on to the next slide and give an overview. So in terms of the goal is to introduce the concept of radical acceptance, explore its psychological roots, and build practical tools to integrate it into your daily life. What we'll talk about a lot during this session is that radical acceptance is a practice. So it is not a one-time thing. It's not something that you learn and all of a sudden you're accepting everything and everything is great. So that's not what it's about. It is a daily practice. And with that, there can feel like there's struggles sometimes and emotions can most certainly come up as well. Okay. So understanding radical acceptance. Radical acceptance is a core concept in dialectical behavioral therapy, also known as DBT, and means accepting reality as it is without resistance or judgment, even when it's painful or undesirable. So I don't know about you, but when I see this, this feels like a heavy lift. It feels like a heavy lift in the sense that we're trying to not resist, we're trying not to judge, and those are things that we do as human beings. And so it's also seeing the words painful and undesirable may not also feel great. But a part of what this is really about is working towards these things. So it's not being perfect at them. It's not about perfectionism, but it's working towards feeling less resistance and feeling less judgment. Also, in terms of understanding radical acceptance, it's the journey of accepting reality, even if it's painful or unjust. And so I think that what can be difficult about it is you can be holding two things or more than two things at a time. So you can be holding the fact that it is reality and that it is painful and unjust. And you also want to be able to maybe heal through it. And you want to be able to experience joy, even if you're experiencing pain as well too. So that's a big part of this, is being able to hold multiple emotions at one time, or even states of being at one time. So that's why it's a practice for sure, because it's something that we don't necessarily do all the time in our lives or even encouraged to do. And so there's also another way of thinking about it is that pain plus non-acceptance equals pain and attaching to the suffering. So in a sense, it's almost like you're creating a boulder. So if you're experiencing the pain, that's the reality and it's happening. If there's not an acceptance of it, it's not approval, we'll get into that. So you don't have to approve of what you're experiencing, but if there's not acceptance around it, then that can lead to additional suffering. So then another way of looking at it is that pain plus acceptance equals pain. So I'm acknowledging that there's some pain that's going to be present within this process. So that doesn't necessarily go away. But what it does allow for is more space. So when we think about acceptance, we don't have to think about it as approval, because it's not approval. More so, we can think about acceptance as creating space within ourselves to be able to have space for healing, for self-compassion, and for more mindfulness. So in a sense, it's you're able to zoom out a little bit more and allow for more in your life, when there's pain plus the acceptance versus pain plus the non-acceptance. Okay. All right. And so, as I stated before, but I think this is the part that's really important, and sometimes we can forget this along the way, is that it's not a state of approval. It's not a state of being overly positive. So I believe this might be touching on what you were mentioning, or Mary as well too. So it's not about being overly positive. It involves fully acknowledging and embracing the present moment, even when it's painful or difficult, and letting go of the emotional struggles that arise from fighting against things we cannot control. And I think also too, where some wiggle room is here is, depending on the scenario, it might be something we can't control in this moment. Or it could be something that in the future we may have a little bit more control over, or a little bit more influence on. So maybe temporary, or it may be something where we don't see where we'll be able to control it. So we can look towards, like, what is it that we can control in our lives instead? Where does our circle of control actually lie? Okay. So I have a reflection prompt here. And so I'm going to ask you just to take a second to think of a time when resisting reality created more suffering for you. And so, with thinking about that, what shifted when you started to accept even a little bit? So it may not be full on acceptance, when you started to accept even a little bit what was happening. So another way of saying this is, when you started to be in the present moment with what was happening and accepting, okay, even though I don't like this, it's happening. So I am going to talk about some tools that you can use when it comes to radical acceptance. And I just want to reiterate here that this is a practice. And so it's not meant to be something that you experience every single day and every single moment. If you get to that place, that's wonderful. But it's not meant to be another area where we're practicing perfection or trying to be perfect. More so, these are tools that we can use when we are feeling some of that pain and discomfort or suffering, and we want to make it feel a little bit lighter. So that's more so a part of the goal, is like lightening the load, which doesn't mean that it takes the load away. And so I think that that's also the hard part as well too. And that's why the approval doesn't have to be there as well. All right. So in terms of tools, and what I will say too is that these tools feel, they're coming from DBT. They feel very like, you do this and you'll be fine. What I want to say is that they're things that you can work towards and practice. And so they're not meant to be something that you can just automatically do all the time, because it does go against the grain, as someone said. Even judgment is something that we do as human beings, and for survival reasons sometimes as well too. And so in a sense, it's a practicing noticing the judgment as well too. So one way, or one tool, is mindfulness. So be present without judgment. And so that's something you're working towards doing. A reality check, or something you can ask yourself, is, what am I refusing to accept right now? So this can help with clarity. And so part of the reason why you're asking yourself this question, and it can feel in one way, depending on what your internal narrative is at the time, it can feel like you're judging yourself or like questioning yourself. But instead, the idea here is that you approach this question with curiosity. And the curiosity is what am I refusing to accept right now? Because that can bring further clarity on what it is that you're actually trying to navigate through. And this question, depending on who you are, you may answer, or what your experiences are, this question can be answered so many different ways. An additional tool is validation. So a big part of this is not to dismiss your own feelings. And so another part of this is to name and honor your feelings. And so if the feeling that you're having is just that this is difficult, this is hard, I'm having a tough time, well, that's a describing of like your state or how you're feeling at the moment, then it's honoring that that's where you are at that moment. And there may be moments where it feels a little bit lighter. And so it's also being able to honor those moments as well too. And so there are many tools that we can use as well that do help. Some people don't necessarily need these tools, and some find these tools helpful. So there's also the feelings wheel that can be helpful in just naming your experience, because we do find that bringing language to your experience can help us to gain more comfort when we're actually able to put words to what we're experiencing versus having it feel like this, just feel heavy or just feel like we don't really know how to describe to others or even to ourselves what we're experiencing. So just gaining more language around how you're feeling is really important as well too. Letting go, much easier said than done. And so a tool that you can use towards that is identifying what is out of your control. And so by identifying that, then that is an area in which you could say to yourself, all right, I want to practice setting this down is another way of saying it. I want to practice setting this down. This is something that's not fully in my control. And what you can then also do is identify areas in which you do feel like you have more control. And so it can be action based. So things like researching or things like looking at other methods or alternatives and things of that sort. But it also can be things like I have been leaning into people pleasing for a lot of my life. And in this chapter of my life, I would like to do more things that I really want to do. And so it even can be looked at in that vein. So what my experience, what I'm going through health wise is real and it's occurring. And I would really like to spend some time saying yes to myself a little bit more. And so that's more so in your circle of control. So that's how we can practice letting go in a way that sometimes can feel a little bit more tangible and real. And then the fifth tool is turning the mind, which is a DBT tool. And we're going to talk more about what turning the mind is. And a part of this is to recommit to acceptance, not approval, but recommit to acceptance again and again and again and again. And I think that's what can be frustrating about this, is that it is a journey. It's not a sprint. It's not something where there's even necessarily like an end date in terms of how we in terms of practicing this. This is something that we continuously practice, and over time oftentimes does start to feel a little bit easier, because what you are doing, as someone said, in terms of like what's laid out here is going against the grain oftentimes of what we are taught. And so we really are rewiring our brain to think differently, and that takes time. But then over time, this can become more of your normal, to start looking at things this way than maybe how you looked at things in the past. So here's an example here. And I will say that with this example, sometimes it can feel like, okay, so you just do this, then you do 1, 2, 3, 4, and you get your end result. And we know that's just not how life works. But I still want to give this example just in the sense of like what it can look like in some ways. And then we'll go into more discussion as well too, so we can get more of your voices into the room as well. Okay, so let's meet Tasha. Tasha has an autoimmune disease. At first, she resisted and overworked herself as a way to distract herself from her current reality. So that was coping. Doesn't have to be good or bad. That was a way in which she was coping through, was by leaning into other things that she felt like she had more control over. Through therapy and time, she learned radical acceptance isn't giving up, which I think oftentimes it can feel like when we're hearing the words radical acceptance, that it means that we're giving up, or we're giving into, or that we're approving. So it's not about giving up, and it's acknowledging that feelings are healthy as well too. She now practices caring for herself with self-compassion and uses the tool turning the mind, which we'll talk more about as well. So this is a journey. This is an ongoing practice that she's using. She is not happy with the illness and works towards spending more time on what she can control. So we have a mini exercise here, and this is, and it's using the tool turning the mind. And so, what I'm going to ask here is you identify a current situation you can't change, and it can be anything in your life. And so I would like to open this up as well too, just so whatever comes to mind first for you. And you also don't have to share exactly what it is. And if someone would like to share, they can. But identify a situation you can't change. And so the ask here is to sit quietly and say inwardly. And I'll also say you can come up with your own, and you can come up with this in your own words, what you can say to yourself that really resonates with you, because that's important. But here's an example of something you can say to yourself. This is what's happening. I may not like it, but I have the ability to work towards being present with this reality. This is the reality, yet it does not define me. And so the thought process between, or the thought process behind what's written here is that, yes, it's reality. No, you don't like it. And you are sitting with it and being present with it. And which can help to make things feel a little bit more expansive, that what you're experiencing also doesn't have to define who you are. So it's also allowing you to think about other aspects of who you are that are still present, that you still value, that you still want to lean into, that are important to you, so that you're not allowing your current experience to define who you are in your totality. Okay. And then you can repeat this gently to yourself if this resonates. You can also think about, and it may come to you automatically, but even in the future, just think about what is it that you would like to say to yourself that you feel like would be a way of self-soothing. Like we say in therapy, even a way of even like mothering yourself as well too, bringing comfort to yourself. How would you like to talk to yourself in moments when things feel difficult and hard? And another practice you can do, which is along the lines of mindfulness, is to notice any tension or softening in your body, and both can be happening. And write down where you feel tension or softening in your body as well too. So this is something you can actually practice. It can become a daily practice. And for some people, this is a daily practice. They start off their day this way, in their day this way, or whenever they can fit it in, weekly, monthly, or even when they're maybe starting to feel more intense emotions. I will say that when you really feel intense, it's actually harder for these tools to work. So you do want to practice them prior to really feeling something very intensely. However, it's something that you can practice just to be aware of your state of being, and to have a tool where you can actually feel like there's something you can do about it. So this is within your circle of control as well too, to do a practice of this sort.
Uh,
So yeah.
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 So I noticed something similar, and being practiced with tapping on certain areas on the body, and while talking to the self. Thank
Yes.
you.
Okay. Yeah. So you bring up another tool, which is tapping. Yes. So that's another tool as well too, a mindfulness-based tool that can also be used as well to help with stress relief and self-soothing. Okay.
And do you use tapping in radical acceptance? Could you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, so it's a tool that can be used. And so in terms of the tapping piece, what you could do is it helps to with calming the body, and so it helps with the mind-body connection. So for example, if you had maybe I'll call this a mantra. Say if you had this mantra memorized, this is what's happening. What you could do is you could actually say that mantra to yourself while tapping, because while doing the tapping points, it's also self-soothing, and it's self-soothing to the nervous system. So in a sense, it may also allow you to also hear the words a little bit clearer as well too. And so it's something where you can combine those two things to help with feeling a mind-body connection and feeling less disassociated in a sense from bringing in more of a connection between your mind and your body. Does that answer the question?
Thank you.
So I do have another group discussion prompt. It looks like we have about 10 minutes or so we'll get as far as we can here. I do want to be mindful of time. And so the question is here, and it's along the lines of what we've been talking about. It's worded a little bit differently, so curious to see what this may spark within you. Think about a situation in your life that has felt unacceptable. What have you been telling yourself about it? So what's your internal dialogue? What's the internal dialogue saying? So taking a second to tune in terms of like, what are you saying to yourself about it? Are there any judgments coming up about it? Are the ways in which you're self-soothing? Because it doesn't always have to be bad. Are the ways in which you're also like self-soothing as well too? So what is the internal dialogue saying? What would it look like to stop fighting reality and work towards acceptance? So that's a big question. And so it's something worth maybe kind of sitting and like thinking about, what does it even mean to stop fighting reality? What would it mean to work towards acceptance, not approval, but work towards acceptance of the current reality? And I will say one way that people do go about this is by naming the facts. Because oftentimes, like what we do is that we learn about something and we know that it is a reality, but it's more so like our judgments and the narratives we create around what's happening that causes us pain and suffering. So sometimes that can get in the way of being able to be accepting of it as well too. And what fears arise when you consider radically accepting it? And what I will say is that many of you spoke to this around like fears that arise in general around radical acceptance. And so so a couple of things here. One is that you can most certainly, and I can also maybe ask Jillian or find a way to send these questions out after the session as well too. But in this moment, maybe just focus in on one of these questions just for yourself. And think about what comes to mind for you. If you have a pen, a piece of paper, or if you have your laptop or your phone, whatever your preference is, take a moment to maybe write down a few notes around what comes up for you. It might be bullet points. It might be just feelings that come up for you. It might be additional questions that come up in response to the questions. It doesn't matter what it is. So even that is a practice in being non-judgmental around what comes up. Or if you're drawing a blank, even sitting in that for a second. Just that nothing's really coming up for you right now, that you're feeling really stuck around these questions as well too. And allowing that to be without creating a lot of judgment around that as well. So yeah, so just take a few seconds to pick the question and if you can, do a little bit of writing on it or at least think it through for yourself. So as a part of my practice, I ask my clients to do a lot of journaling. So hence why I have lots of journaling prompts. I'm not going to ask you another prompt. However, this is maybe something that can be sent out after this session if it's helpful, but they're just additional journal prompts that you can ask yourself. And what I do find, and also what research has found as well too, is that journaling can help with clarity. And so if that is something that you are seeking, it's one way. Of course, there's many other ways as well too. So here's just additional journal prompts that could be helpful as well. And to bring things together in terms of the closing and any takeaways as well. One is that radical acceptance is a practice. So I'm going to sound like a broken record because there's a lot of things that we've already talked about, but are important. Radical acceptance is a practice, not a one-time decision. You can accept reality and still work to change the future. And you can also decide what aspects of the future or even what aspects you're working to change that are actually in your control. Acceptance does not erase pain. I think that feels like a hard one for me. I don't know how it feels for others. Because I think oftentimes we don't want to feel pain. We don't, whether it's emotional pain or physical pain, we don't want it. But I think that is a big part of this is that it's not going to take away the pain, but it does make space for healing. And then I'm going to end with this quote. And the quote is, which many of you may have already heard already: acceptance doesn't mean passive resignation. It means facing the present with clarity and courage.